Good, good, good. Okay, so if we can pass these around, either use one between two, possibly. Yeah, then it's all about. Right. Okay. So when these things come round, I'm going to talk today about the Gomel blessing, Bracha HaGomel, the Thanksgiving blessing, which some of us have said on hopefully uh, happy as well. A good solution to a problem anyway. So basically, we're going to talk about the Hagomo blessing, some of the origins of it, why we say it, when we say it, means when we don't say it, etc. So firstly, um, we should know that there is actually a difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim as far as saying this blessing. Sephardim are much more passionate about their Judaism than Ashkenazim. And so therefore they will say this blessing on more occasions than we Ashkenazim do. If you look at source number one, we'll see there, or source one, two, and three is the actual blessing as it appears in the Siddur. And source number one actually is the preface to the blessing, which the Sephardim will say. Before they actually say the bracha, they say another line, Odeh Hashem b'chol levav, b'sod yisharim ve'ida, and then they will actually say the bracha, which we say. As you know, the bracha has two parts. There's the blessing the individual says, and then the blessing that the response of the congregation after the blessing. And then the Sephardim finish up after the congregation response by saying, Amen, Amen, may this be thy will. So the blessing actually is, if you look at source number two, we're blessing God who does good to, it says in English, to the undeserving, but in Hebrew it says the chayavim, to those people who are actually chayav. Chayav, they are, in other words, they are, see, of something which would cause them to actually die. And they're blessing God for actually saving them and giving them a reprieve. So that is the blessing. And then the congregation say, those who've been good to you, he who's been good to you should be good to you forever. Amen. Selah. So that's the idea of the blessing, the Thanksgiving blessing. Now, what's the origin of this idea of having a Thanksgiving blessing? Well, the origin actually is the Thanksgiving sacrifice. There was a Thanksgiving sacrifice, the Todah. Todah means thank you. Thanksgiving sacrifice, which was brought in the temple. It was an optional sacrifice brought in the temple. If you look at source number 4, it comes from Vayikra, chapter 7, and we see there it says that someone offers a Thanksgiving offering, should bring the Thanksgiving offering to the temple, a voluntary offering, together with unleavened cakes and leavened cakes, and together with, in fact, 40 loaves of bread, 40 loaves of bread for the sacrifice, 30 unleavened and 10 leavened. And the conditions of the sacrifice were that the sacrifice had to be eaten on the same day, had to be finished up on the same day, that day and that night, and it couldn't be left to the following day. Whereas other communal sacrifices, there was a couple of days to eat it all up. So there was a much shorter time scale with the Thanksgiving sacrifice, the Todah offering. So that was the origin of that was in Leviticus, in Vayikra. And then we move over to source number 5. And source number 5 is actually showing the follow-up to this, where in the Mishnah lays down the rules for the Thanksgiving sacrifice, and we will recognize this paragraph as part of the Ezehu Makoman prayer we say at the beginning of Shacharit, before Pesukah de Zimra, the Birchot HaShachar. We talk about the different sacrifices. It mentions there the Hatodah ve'el nazir korashim kalim shchila b'chol makom v'azara v'tamataon shtei matanot she'nabah. It talks about the Thanksgiving sacrifice. Again, it talks about how it had to be brought and then also had to be eaten up within the day. And it also mentions in the English there that the individuals who actually have to say this blessing, and I'll go on to that in a second. As I mentioned, the Todah sacrifice, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, was an individual sacrifice. It wasn't a communal sacrifice. It was brought by an individual after one of four type of events which could happen, which I'll go into in a minute. And it was when it was brought in the temple, it was brought together with a psalm, the Psalm Mizmor LeTodah, that Psalm of Thanksgiving. Psalm 100 was actually said or sung at the same time as the sacrifice was brought. That psalm forms part of our prayers, part of Pesukei de Zimra, Psalm Mizmor LeTodah. We know we say it before the extra bits for Shabbat and Yom Tov. And it's quite a nice psalm. If you look at source number 6, it says, raise a shout to the Lord and give thanks to the Lord, etc. It's a Thanksgiving psalm, and it was said, as I say, as a song when the sacrifice was brought. Today, we no longer have the sacrifice. We don't have a temple. As a remembrance of what went on in the temple, we say Mizmor LeTodah, we say that psalm as part of the morning service. Now, in order to commemorate how the sacrifice was brought and when the sacrifice was brought in the temple, we have a rubric. A rubric are the little notes in the Siddur explaining when and when we don't say Mizmor LeTodah. So if you look at the rubric in the Siddur, you'll see, first of all, Mizmor LeTodah is always said standing. Why? Because the person bringing the sacrifice had to stand when they brought the Todah sacrifice to the temple. Therefore, we stand when we say Mizmor LeTodah. We didn't bring the Todah, the Thanksgiving offering, was not brought on a Shabbat or Yom Tov because it was an individual sacrifice. It didn't override the laws of Shabbat. A communal sacrifice overrode the laws of Shabbat. So on Shabbat or Yom Tov in the temple, they used to slaughter the animals and burn the animals on the temple, on the altar, even though it was forbidden to do this in Shabbat. It overrode the laws of Shabbat. An individual sacrifice did not override the laws of Shabbat, and therefore we don't say Mizmor LeTodah on Shabbat and Yom Tov because the sacrifice wasn't brought. Also, I mentioned a few minutes ago that the sacrifice was brought with bread. There was 40 loaves of bread were brought with the sacrifice, 30 unleavened and 10 leavened loaves of bread were brought. Leaven is chametz, and therefore the sacrifice was not brought during Pesach. So therefore we don't say Mizmor LeTodah during Pesach. Erev Pesach is a problem because we can't eat chametz after 10 o'clock, roughly speaking, in the morning, and therefore there wasn't enough time to consume those 10 loaves of bread by 10 o'clock. Therefore, the Todah offering was not brought on Erev Pesach. Therefore, we do not say Mizmor LeTodah on Erev Pesach. The other problematic day is Erev Yom Kippur, when we have to get ready for the fast, and the fast comes in the afternoon, late afternoon, and there wasn't enough time to eat all the food from the sacrifice and the bread. Therefore, the offering was not brought on Erev Yom Kippur, and therefore we don't say Mizmor LeTodah on Erev Yom Kippur. An anomaly to all of this actually is Tisha B'Av and Erev Tisha B'Av. As we know, during the Second Temple period, they kept the fast of Tisha B'Av because the first temple had been destroyed. But according to the rabbis, the Todah sacrifice was brought on Tisha B'Av and Erev Tisha B'Av, and therefore we do say Mizmor LeTodah on Tisha B'Av and Erev Tisha B'Av. One thing I should mention is that the 40 loaves was quite a lot of food. So a lot of food was brought with the sacrifice, and the idea was the individual didn't have to eat it themselves. They could share it with their friends and family. And what they did, they had like a celebration meal, a Sudat Hoda'ah, a celebration meal, Thanksgiving meal, where they had this food to thank God for the fact that they've been delivered from whatever reason they had to bring the sacrifice. And some people today do have a Sudat Hoda'ah if they've been seriously ill. Sometimes they do have a celebration meal afterwards to give thanks, and that's the origin of doing this. There is actually a interesting. I read somewhere that there was a comparison with this and the Seder, because if you think about it, when we have the Seder on Pesach, we're celebrating our release from captivity. We're celebrating the fact we crossed over the sea, we passed through the desert, whatever it is. There are a few reasons, and in normal circumstances, one could argue that having been delivered, we would give a Todah sacrifice or would have a Thanksgiving meal to thanks being delivered. And one could argue that the Seder, in fact, could have been that kind of event. The children who came to the Seder, who had been used to seeing their families having these Sudat Hoda'ah, these Thanksgiving meals, would say, Manish Dana Halal, why is this night different to other nights? On other Sudas we have leaven and unleavened bread. We've only got unleavened bread today. So that could have been, some rabbis say, the origin of the Manish Dana prayer, that the meal looked different to the other Thanksgiving meals they used to hold in their homes. Now, looking at the actual Hagomel blessing, that has replaced the actual communal sacrifice, or the individual sacrifice. And if you look at source number 7 in the Gemara Barachot 54b, Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav said 4 must offer thanks to God with a thanks offering and a special blessing. And these are those who have crossed over the sea, those who have walked in the desert, those who have been ill and recovered, and those who have been to prison and been left out. And so that's what it says in the Gemara. And in the Shulchan Aruch, on source number 8, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, that is the first section of the Shulchan Aruch, it sets out here the laws. Arba'at Tzrichim Lahodot. There are 4 people who have to give thanks. Yodei Hayam, those people crossed over the sea. Kisha'alu Mimena, come out okay from it. Holchei Midbarot, those who crossed over the deserts. Shiagiu Yeshuv, who come to a habitation. Mishaya Chole, someone who's sick. V'nit Rabbi is now healed. Mishaya Chavush, someone who's in prison. B'veit HaSurim, V'yatsa, and come out. And Siman for these 4 types of individual is from the words, if you look in section number 9, source number 9 from the Siddur, the bracha of Hoda'ah, the Thanksgiving bracha towards the end of the Amida prayer, V'chol hachayim yodu chasela, v'yalu et shimcha be'emet, you know the bracha, V'chol hachayim, all those who are alive shall give thanksgiving, give thanks, hachayim. Chayim is the word Chayim has 4 letters. Chet, Yud, Yud, Mem. Chet stands for Chavush, those who have been incarcerated. The first Yud stands for Yisurim, those who have been afflicted with illness. The second Yud stands for Yam, those who've crossed over the sea. And the Mem stands for Midbar, those who've crossed over the desert. So that is the mnemonic to actually remind us of the 4 types of individuals who actually have to say this blessing. Now, if we expand upon the reasons why one says this blessing and the circumstances, as I mentioned, there's 4 reasons given: being in jail, being ill, crossing over the sea, or crossing through a desert. Now, firstly, being in jail. Now, the reason this blessing was said when one came out of jail was that in the olden times, if someone went to prison, it's very unlikely you ever come out alive. You went to prison, usually, you steal a loaf of bread in England a couple of hundred years, a couple of thousand years ago, 100 years ago, whatever it was, you would be strung up, you'd be hung. So the prison was a place as a death sentence, or you lived in, certain countries, think you lived in Nazi Germany, you went to prison by the Gestapo, you wouldn't come out alive. So being released from prison was actually you're thanking God for saving your life. Nowadays, going to prison, if you're Jewish and you have a white-collar crime, you're going there to cheder, you're going there for a holiday. So basically, it's not you're not really in danger of your life. So it's arguable whether you need to take bracha if you come out of prison under these circumstances. So if I don't know, if you are a lawyer and you visit your client in jail, or you're a prison chaplain, or you work in the prison service, you don't have to say the bracha when you come out, because you actually weren't in danger of your life just because they lock the doors when you go in. So it's not so appropriate today. Illness, what is described as illness? Well, illness doesn't mean you've had a little cough and cold and haven't come to shore for one day. It means you've been ill, properly ill. And the criteria usually is that you've been bedridden for 3 or more days. That is considered serious illness. Or if you've undergone surgery, major surgery, whatever, that is considered illness. And on recovery, you would say the Birkat HaGomel. If it's something less than that, there's no harm in you having a Suda Hoda'ah. You can have a Thanksgiving meal, but you wouldn't necessarily say the bracha in shul, because by saying the bracha, you're using God's name. So we have to be careful. You're using it for correct reasons. Crossing the sea. Well, if you cross the sea, so if you go on an ocean, across the ocean on a boat, you would say this bracha on arrival at the other end. Okay. So even in fact, if you went on a cruise across the ocean, across the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, across an ocean, you would say the bracha after the cruise. If you're just getting a little steamboat down the River Thames, you wouldn't necessarily say this because unless it's a very rough day or something. But it's not really said. In fact, I should point out that when it talks about a journey, there is a minimum journey length to warrant saying this blessing, and that is a distance of the time taken to travel 4 mil. Mil is not a mile; it's a biblical distance. It's about 2/3 of a mile, and they say that it takes 18 minutes to walk a mil. Therefore, 4 mil will take 72 minutes. So if you've been on a journey for more than 72 minutes, like a sea journey more than 72 minutes, then of course it's considered that you've gone that distance. What about a land journey? It doesn't mention a land journey. It talks about crossing a desert. So a land journey, if you drive from here to Manchester, it'll take you more than 72 minutes. Would you say the bracha on arrival in Manchester? Well, if you're Sephardi, you would. Sephardim do, because they, as I say, they are much more passionate. They will say the bracha. We Ashkenazim don't. So if you drive from here to Manchester, or drive from here to Edinburgh, whatever it is, you wouldn't say the bracha on arrival, but the Ashkenazim would. So they're much more lenient for this. And illness, as I said, I mentioned 3 days in bed would considered be a serious illness. Now, what are the rulings about saying this bracha? Because the Todah sacrifice was brought standing up, you have to stand up to say the bracha. If you can't stand up, you can't say the bracha. You have to be standing to say the bracha, okay? That's the first thing. We have to do it in public. It's a public event, and therefore you have to have a minyan of people present when you say the bracha. And to ensure that, we usually do it on a day when you lane. When there's laning, there's always a minyan present because you can't lane without a minyan. So we usually do it on a day there's laning. And if there's no chiyuv to be up, you would be called up to the Torah first, and then say the bracha after your second bracha. The minyan, which has to be present to say the bracha, has to or should include at least 2 Talmidei Chachamim, 2 learned people. I wouldn't say have to be sort of Bayonim of the basin, but two learned people. And usually in a shul, when there is a minyan of this lady, usually there is the rabbi of the shul or a rabbi in shul. And we assume that the Baal Korah, the person laning, knows what he's doing, and therefore he is semi a Talmid Chacham. So therefore you got 2 people who are of learning there present. So that would suffice. Okay. What about timescale? Now this is an interesting one because there are 2 major commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, on the Orach Chaim. One is the Mishnah Brura, who, as you know, was Rabbi Kagan, who lived in Poland, and the other one was the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Epstein, who lived in Belarus. So the two major commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, and both have slightly different opinions about the way we observe things. So the Chofetz Chaim wrote the Mishnah Brura, and the Rabbi Epstein wrote the Aruch HaShulchan, 2 different commentators. Now, they have slightly different opinions about things. On the question of the time scale, the Aruch HaShulchan, who is followed by most people living in Chutz La'aretz, he says it has to be said within 3 days. If you haven't said the Gomel blessing within 3 days of the recovery from the event, you've missed your slot. You can't do it anymore. You have 3 days. The Mishnah Brura is less onerous. He said, yeah, ideally within 3 days, but if you don't do it within 3 days, you can go a few more days. And in fact, in extenuating circumstances, you can say up to a month after the event. If you think about it, you're saying thank you to God. You're saying thank you to God for recovery. So, you think about it. If you're given a present by someone, you normally would say thank you as soon as possible after you receive this gift. You wouldn't wait a few months. Say, oh, by the way, that present you gave for my birthday a year ago, thank you so much. You wouldn't normally do that. You would do it as soon as possible. Likewise, here you want to thank God within a short time scale. So 3 days ideally, and otherwise you could go a bit longer. So in fact, there's an example given, if, for example, there's a question about flying in planes for a start. The question flying in an airplane is questionable. Some rabbis say yes, some rabbis say no, because air travel is not as say, as risky as it used to be many years ago, it's as safe as driving, or maybe a car is even more dangerous than a plane these days. Who knows? But so a lot of rabbis do. Rosh Feinstein say you do say the bracha after flying in a plane, especially over a long distance, over across the Atlantic or something. But if you're flying from, I don't know, you're flying from London to Paris, maybe you wouldn't. But everyone does what they want to do. They ask their local rabbi what's the best thing to do. But if, for example, you flew in from New York on a Sunday night, and on the red eye, and you arrive in, I don't know, Heathrow at 7 o'clock in the morning, Heathrow Airport, okay? The time you've gone through customs and passport control, etc., time you get to a Jewish community, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, you've missed Shacharit on the Monday morning, okay? So you couldn't bench Gomer that morning. That's day number one. Monday's day number one. Tuesday's day number two. Wednesday is day number three. Thursday is day number 4. So if you're following the Aruch HaShulchan, who says it has to be within 3 days, you've missed the slot. You can't do it on Thursday. You lost the opportunity. So in those circumstances, you could bench Gomer on the Tuesday or Wednesday morning, even if you're not laning. You could do it in front of the minyan then, if you follow the Aruch HaShulchan. Follow the Mishnah Berurah, you're okay. You can do it on the Thursday morning. That's an aside there. What about men and what about women? Men obviously do say the bracha. Women, well, there's a question. In the original text, it says women can't do it because we can't have a woman sort of saying prayers in public in front of men. It's not allowed. Huh? Yeah, okay. Sephardim, no problem. Women can do it, no problem at all. Ashkenazim is a problem. It depends on what shul you go to and what's your minhag. In the modern Orthodox communities, such as we live in, it's now customary women do say Hagomel. They wouldn't be called to the Torah to say it, obviously. We don't allow that in our shuls, but Reform and Conservative, I'm sure would, but we don't. So what happens is a woman would say it from behind the mechitza, and the men would answer, or possibly the woman would say it in the hall. When Kiddush is being said, they would say it there in the shul hall afterwards, but they can say it. Yeah.
Just, do you know my green call-up? Chief Rabbi, I saw just the new one's just come out, and so if anybody wants to buy one, but the Chief Rabbi actually said to me I should put in it Gomer for women.
Oh, good.
So it's not the bracha, interestingly, but it's the response.
Okay.
You have to change the response to feminine. That's right.
Yeah.
So I think Chief Rabbi.
So that's the answer for the United Synagogue. We do allow women to say it. So that's about men and women. What about children? Now, interesting, because the bracha you say, the Gomer bracha, if you look at the actual bracha again on source number 2, we're saying he is good to those who are chayav, who are guilty of a crime, who then are liable for the death penalty as such. Chayavim, who's guilty. A child cannot be guilty of a crime in Jewish law because a child is not responsible for his or her actions till they are bar bat mitzvah. So a child under bar bat mitzvah cannot be chayav. Therefore, they have nothing to say the bracha for. So children do not have to say the bracha. I think nowadays they do let children say the bracha. I think they've bent it a bit now for children. They do say the bracha, especially but no, I'll come on to that. So, but the children, if they are of understanding, I think some schools do allow women to say it, but the official line is children do not say it. Can you say it for others? Okay, on your question there, can you say it for others? There are only 3 types of individual you can say the bracha for. You can say it for your wife. A man can say it for his wife, because Ishto Kagufa, a man is like his wife. He says the same formula, except he's rather than saying Shegamalani Kotov, you say Shegamal Ishti Kotov. He is bestowed upon my wife, all good, rather than on me. A man can say it for his wife, either if she's present in shul or even if she's not present in shul, he can say it for his wife. A man can say it for his father or mother. So if you have an older parent who's undergone an operation and they're not well enough to come to shul, or they can't physically stand up or can't speak, you can say it on behalf of your parent. You'll say Shegamal Avi or Imi rather than Shegamal Lani. And the other type of individual you can say it for is someone called a Rav Muvhak. It's your rabbi, but not necessarily your rabbi of your synagogue. It's your rabbi who you are thankful for all your Jewish learning. It's your rabbi who's inspired you and has maybe brought you back to Judaism, wherever it is. Your rabbi who has taught you everything is considered in Jewish law like a parent, and you can say it for that kind of rabbi as well. The other occasion where someone could say it for someone else is if one person is saying it and a few people have experienced the same experience, that person can include the other people in his prayer. For example, just say, I don't know, a group of people have been away to on a trip together. They've been on a long distance trip. They come back together, all come to shul on the morning of Laning. There's 10 boys standing there. We've all come back from Israel, from Yeshiva. We're on the bench global. We don't have to have all 10 of them getting up one after the other, say the bracha. One person can say it and include in his mind all the other people, and include him in his blessing. So that's a way of speeding it up. Anyway, so that's an introduction to Hagomel. I've got a few. I did some a course on this because it's part of the Mishnah Berurah course I'm doing on time, and there are various questions, which to try and test one's knowledge of this. And I've got a few questions here which I could run through with you, but alternatively you can ask some questions, or we can call it to a close. So, yeah.
It's a minhag nowadays. We don't eat unleavened bread either from the first of Nisan or from Purim. So they're saying this Minnesota, they had unleavened bread right up until Pesach. So if it was good enough for the days for the base of Mikdash, why do we have this minhag now?
Matzah more tasty. But there's nothing wrong in eating matzah. The only day you can't eat matzah is Erev Pesach. The other days you can eat matzah. There's nothing wrong in eating. It's just a minhag. It's not a favor to eat it. Yeah, question.
Say traveling, two questions. If you travel by coach, for example, a group, one says it's for the whole group.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you're traveling, let's say you travel to Manchester and back, you wait until you come back, or do you?
Good question. Okay. You travel somewhere and then you're returning, you say the bracha on your return. So in other words, if you're going away on a trip, you're going to, I don't know, you're flying to New York on a trip, you go there for 2 or 3 days, living out of your suitcase, you don't bring back to your homeland, your home country, and then you unpack. That's when your trip is finished, and that's when you say Hagomel. It's not, obviously, if you're going to away for a month trip or something else. Okay.
You stop.
You wait your safely home. That's when you're thanking God for coming home safely. Anyway, any other questions? Yeah. Okay, great. I'll turn the recording off. Say goodbye to everyone on Zoom, and right, and that's.